Well, yeah. What's your take? What's your take on the U.S. banning TikTok?
So, I think it's important to note that this is not the first company that the U.S. government has decided shouldn't be foreign owned.
Which is?
There's been a whole number. There's a whole
What are
organization called
significant ones?
CFIUS. So I closely covered out of 9/11. There was a company called Dubai Ports World that owned a bunch of the ports. Like a bunch of the ports across the U.S. were actually owned by or being acquired by Dubai Ports World.
Wow.
So at the time, it's post 9/11. How do we feel about like a Middle Eastern Arab company owning these key elements of American infrastructure? And so the government
renationalized it?
Well, the government basically blocked that acquisition.
Okay.
And
they were trying to acquire it.
Yeah, so there's an organization called CFIUS, CFIUS, and they will do analyses all the time, being like, are we okay with this being owned by a foreign government? Or sorry, by a foreign
CFIUS
company.
stands for?
The Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S. Yeah. And so ultimately, CFIUS will go through being like, oh, this, I don't know, example, German company wants to buy 5 nuclear power plants in America. Is that something we feel okay about?
It's honestly a lot deeper than it applies to every foreign investment in the U.S. So Energy X, we have major investors that are foreign, one from Korea, one from Italy, and we had to go through CFIUS.
Yeah.
We had to basically look at, is it okay for this Korean company to invest into Energy X?
I mean, at the end of the day, the government's job is to ensure, number one, that we're protected in our national security. And they've determined at a very high level at the FBI and national security organizations that they do not trust China's ability to, influence ByteDance. And 170 million, half of America has TikTok. The way they compare it is...
And it's all of America's youth.
If they
100% of America's youth.
And beyond.
Yeah.
And the way to think about it, as they described it, is think about it at the height of the Cold War, the Russian government, the communist Soviet Union, owning CBS, the New York Times, NBC. I mean, like it's a bygone era, but like owning the most influential media organizations.
And writing all the articles. And writing all the articles, right?
Right, and ensuring that like today on the front page, you're going to get X.
And the majority, I would assume, of the users are at a very impressionable age.
Yeah.
So they're super young. And that moment, I don't know if you remember when you were in middle school or high school, it's like those are the downloading times of like you're shaping yourself as an adult, and who you become.
So I had a former CIA director on my podcast last year.
Sorry,
former CIA director.
CIA director.
Yeah, Michael Morrell. And he was talking about the meetings he has with the Chinese, his Chinese counterparts. Because at the end of the day, even when they're adversaries, they have, we still have diplomatic relations. At the end of the day, I've heard it described that like China and the U.S. are sort of divorced parents running the world. Like we don't like each other, but like we both have major, we both have major responsibilities, and ultimately stability is important for both of us for our economic success. And he was like, listen, the way that the Chinese think about history is they have good millennia and bad millennia. They've been around for 6,000 years. So we talk in the US and the West about good decades, bad decades. They talk about centuries and millennia. So for them, gradually get into TikTok and gradually influence people that like, we might not get you this generation, but by the time they have kids, like they'll totally be, influenced one way or another. So that's how they think about it long term. So I think that like there's a legitimate argument to be made that a highly influential social media platform should not, that if there's legitimate concerns about their ability to influence it, both take our data, but also push out certain misinformation, that TikTok should be here, but maybe it shouldn't be owned by a Chinese company. By the way, the same thing went down with Grindr a few years ago, and nobody blinked an eye. Grindr was owned by, and they were worried because of the way the LGBT community is treated in China, and how they could influence things and how they could use their data. And so the U.S. forced a sale of Grindr. At the time, China didn't care. Wow. But it was a much less influential platform.
So what it is that, the U.S. is trying to force the sale within 6 months, and if they don't...
It's up to a year now.
It's up to a year. Yeah. And if they don't sell it, then the app stores, I think like Apple and Google, won't be able to
They'll ban it from the app stores. Right. Which means if you have it on your phone, you have it on your phone, but you're not going to get the updates.
You're not going to get the updates.
So do you think that ByteDance will sell it within the year? Or...
So the Chinese government said absolutely not.
Right,
and the irony is ByteDance says, They have no power over us.
Right.
TikTok, by the way, is owned by ByteDance.
Right.
And it's like half Singaporean, half based in LA. Several Americans sit on the board.
Right.
There's huge non-Chinese ownership of it. But at the end of the day, it's owned by ByteDance. ByteDance controls the algorithm, and the Chinese government has said, nope, we're not selling. Even with a $100 billion valuation or whatever they determined for TikTok. Plus, the algorithm is a secret sauce.
Right.
So there's a lot of talk like, do we sell it without the algorithm? Yeah, that's the addiction, baby. Like that's the drug behind it. So the Chinese government doesn't necessarily want to reveal. I mean, as hard as Meta right now, Mark Zuckerberg's working to replicate.
It's just not as good. Yeah.
And they're gradually getting there. I mean, I feel like Instagram Reels is probably much better than it was a year ago. But at the end of the day, does China want to reveal the secret sauce to the world?
Yeah.
And officially, they say no. I think something to watch. There's multiple lawsuits. TikTok's filed a lawsuit. Influence. I don't think this gets resolved in 25, probably in 2026. It's going to go to the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, it'll be a case. One side says it's freedom of speech for Americans.
Yep.
The other side says it's national security. It's protecting the country. And 9 Supreme Court justices will have to determine that.